I appreciate you lining your crew up here. Obviously, Jim, we've been having conversations over the past many months. I know you sat down and met with Brad a while back, and I think I don't know really how much you know about Sage Job Ops. It's now they've rebranded it, OEM'd it as their production management software. But Sue Alcock's been working with the product for a decade, and we've got a lot of clients that are on Job Ops, and we're struggling with some of these clients from perspective of flexibility and how we have implemented Job Ops for them. And I know you guys still have some standards in place and so forth, but I know just that in between that, it's not necessarily full discrete, but it's project based, but it's not, project accounting is too much. So we're just trying to find that middle ground. And I know you guys do offer above and beyond that. You've got a warranty module and all that. So today what I'm trying to do is we've got an opportunity right now that's called Omaha Track. It's one of our clients that wants to move off of Sage by the end of the year. They're currently using Job Ops. Sue's got a good understanding of what they're doing. And we keep asking some of the same questions, and I just thought it's best to just jump on a call with you guys. I know you guys have some demos out there, but just allow us to kind of walk through with us your solution, where you differentiate from what Acumatica does and what you do, and then that will allow Tim and Sue to be able to ask very specific questions. There's some very specific requirements that we need to get addressed.
So what we're prepared to do is as follows. I'll give about a 10-minute overview, and then Greg will get into the software.
Okay.
Fair enough? So
that works.
All right. So let me share my screen. Whole screen, and you should see a PowerPoint.
Yes.
Great. Okay. So overall, we have one piece of code that we market per segment in the overall manufacturing market. And we'll focus our presentation on what we refer to as Job Shop, but we'll also show you a little bit about the light assembly and make to stock. So on the product, first thing is we work off of the Acumatica Distribution Edition. And we key on the Acumatica kit. Now, mind you, we take that kit and then we apply about 20,000 lines of code that put gray hair on Greg Berry's head. So that kit is a full-featured bill of material, and we'll walk through some of its features. But like any manufacturing package, we have a work order system, an MRP system, a bill of material system, which complements MRP, drives purchasing, work orders, drive inventory, sales orders, drive the BOM, etc. Now I'm going to show you a picture, and focus here on the dynamic. We have a work order system that drives a dynamic BOM. We call it a dynamic BOM because this is its ability. It has three phases: planning, planned, and release. And at any time in any of those phases, we can add or subtract from the BOM. So this is perfect for a job shop environment where you're building from scratch or the same as except, or you take on a pilot program and halfway through you're building it and you need this or that or the other different thing, or you break something, etc. Notice we support BOMs within BOMs, so multiple indentures. The bill of material consumes material out of Acumatica, labor out of Acumatica. We have a full-on MRP system that can take a work order set of work orders over any time horizon a month, a quarter, 6 months, a year, net out all of the demand in terms of the material you need, and generate purchase instructions aggregated per vendor. We receipt the inventory into Acumatica. We then pull it per the work order. We make it, we ship it, and when we do that, we collect all the costs so we can compare your original plan to the actual consume costs. Now, so far, I've been focusing on material, but the BOM also includes labor. And again, we're built on the kit. So the material is out of the Acumatica Item Master. The labor is a non-stock item. Now, the labor can be an individual or it could be like a process. And importantly, the process can have precedence. So one can come before the other. So I can't paint the item until I've assembled it. I can't assemble it until I've deburred all the metal. I can't deburr the metal until I cut it, as an example. So cut, step 1, deburr, step 2, etc. Now, I mentioned before that we market through the different ways people think about manufacturing. So let me explain that we have a job shop module. In the job shop, we have that dynamic BOM, and importantly, we augment this with placeholder items. So these are items that you can cost and quote to the customer, but they're not in Acumatica. Additionally, you can quote items out of Acumatica and mix and match with the placeholder IDs. In addition, Greg has developed for the make-to-order market that may also complement the job shop market, the ability to have template IDs or template bills of material. So on the material side, let's say you're a make-to-order company and 80% of the time the bill of material is the same, 20% of the time you tweak it, you can bring in the template ID for the 80% and then add and subtract for your dynamic BOM. Or let's say that you're a pure, you do the same thing, but you never make the same thing each time. So the BOM is really like, 0%. It's always something different. But because you're in the business of, say, building racks or truck beds or prototype electronics, the labor process, just like implementing an ERP system, is always the same. You've got a discovery session, a setup session, a test, and then user training, etc. Well, we can bring in a templatized labor item to complement the construction of a dynamic bill of material. But back to job shop, we go back and forth with the customer. We can use all of Acumatica's tools to send out the emails and get them back, go with DocuSign, whatever. Finally, the customer says, yeah, I want to buy it. You then take that quote. If you have placeholder items, you create those items in Acumatica, and then you convert the quote to a sales order. And now the sales order creates the work order. So there's a direct relationship between the sales order and the work order. We can also drive demand from the work order itself. So in Excel, you come up with a plan and you say, okay, I'm going to build 50 of these a week or a month or whatever. You can generate the work order and for that amount of items. Or we have a forecasting tool. So we can go look at historical sales or historical work orders. So again, we're integrated with Acumatica, so we can go look at the AR file from Acumatica and use that as the forecast. And, you know, they're in the business, they make X amount a month, 80% of the BOM is all the same. Therefore, they know that framing material, they always need 20 units a month. So they can go into Acumatica purchasing, generate a blanket order for 20 a month. And then we put together a 6-month plan, and we've only got 20 in-house, but we know we're getting 20 a month. Therefore, our MRP is not going to say go buy stuff, because you've already got in Acumatica a purchase plan that will provide those raw materials at the time the work order needs them. So, right off a sales order, right off of our forecast tool, or a work order, we can generate demand for the make to stock world. So we've talked make to order, make to stock, pure job shop, including engineer to order, where you've never ever built the thing before, and every time you do something, it's new. The other one is the more simplistic one, which we call light assembly. And in this case, we're looking at a distributor. And maybe they need to go bundle stuff together, but they don't want to use the Acumatica not stocking kit. Why? Because with the stocking kit, you got to stock everything in the warehouse, which means you've consumed all of the components, and you can't mix and match on the fly per a sales order. In Acumatica, if you want to build things on the fly, you got to use a non-stocking kit. The problem with a non-stocking kit is it's not a finished good item. You can't collect costs. You can't assign labor to the assembly of the item, and you don't have any available to promise visibility to whether or not you could, as an example, sell 35 Model 101s because they're not on the stock. So you'd have to go look, and you got component A, B, and C for that Model 101, and we have the ability to do an ATP on the Model 101 prior to building it, because we can go. I forgot one important thing. Back to job shop. We are bombs within bombs. So I'll show you this picture. So one of the problems that you have in the Acumatica estimating is it's a flat bill when you do the quoting. So no quoting of a bill within a bill within a bill that has placeholder items in it. We don't have that problem. We're multiple indentured with the ability to mix and match items out of the Acumatica inventory system and placeholders. That makes it perfect for engineer to order and or job shop environments where they've got multiple indentures going on. So last picture. What do we don't do? We're not into manufacturing execution. We don't include machine systems on the routings and setup times and work order maintenance and dispatching and tooling and fixed and variable overhead associated with those work centers. In our definition, that's what full manufacturing is about. But notwithstanding that, if you go take a look at features out of Acumatica and features that we have, we match up pretty damn well all the way across the board. And we provide a forecasting tool that's a true statistical forecasting tool that Acumatica doesn't have. And that's the introduction. Any questions?
Yeah, can you go back to one of those charts?
Sure.
On oh, that one works. That's great.
Yep.
Specific to labor, you said the labor in terms of being a component of a BOM is a non-stock item.
Yep.
Over on the right where you say collect labor.
Yep.
is that integrated through like time cards and time activities?
Yes. You have three options. Option one is go into the screen and punch your hours in. Option two is scan it. Option three is there's a stop and a start button on the screen. So when the job comes to the assembler, they can hit the start button and then you can use the computer clock to track their time.
And is that specific to each user?
Yes. And if you've got a small business where you're limited to 10 users, named users, we have a screen that allows you to have unlimited laborers that only consume one net user.
Okay. I don't think that's not an issue for us right now. We don't have any customers that are small business, but it's good. Good to know if, in case we do get into
yeah,
that.
But anyway, you know, some of the older ERP systems had that, right? They're like a time entry where you don't consume the concurrent user. Same concept.
So if you enter it on your labor entry screen, does that populate into the Acumatica time card?
That I don't know. I don't think so.
No.
Okay.
No.
If I enter it as a time activity, does it flow back into your side? Meaning, can I choose a work order from the time activity screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how we can do actual versus plan.
Yeah. No, I just making sure I understand where the collection,
no, it's a good question.
where the collection points are.
Yeah, it's a good question.
So Jim, just go ahead, Tim.
I was going to say, you know, a lot of what we're trying to replace is, as Tony mentioned, things that we do currently with Sage customers running job ops.
Right.
And a lot of it isn't manufacturing per se. And Sue can probably explain some of this a little bit better. But what it really is being able to track the work order side from a sales order for doing various jobs. And I know that's very broad, but as an example, we have a customer who's in the landscaping business. So they want to be able to sell items along with excavation, installation, and a bunch of other labor components to it. So you go buy your trees, your landscape block, they come out, scrape everything off your lot, install all the new stuff, and it's full service landscaping. And in Sage, we do that from a sales order and then generate work orders for each line, which adds in the labor services that need to be tracked and expensed for that line item. And the other question related to that is, can you generate multiple work orders from one sales order?
Yes is the answer to that question.
Okay.
Cool.
But I know Jim.
Show a little bit of software then?
Yeah, but Jim, just to add to that, I mean, that's basically the customer that I brought to your attention, and you had kind of watched the video and then you came back and said that's not really the type of clients we go after. So who are, I guess, how many clients do you have using this that are using Acumatica, and what verticals are they in, and where do you fit very well? Because again, we've done a lot of things outside the box with job ops that necessarily, like Tim said, the way we have it set up at the landscape company.
Right.
Omaha Tie Yard, which Sue can maybe chime in on how we are doing some things there. And Sue, based on what he's going to show here, I guess I'm looking for your feedback if you think this application can replace what we've got set up. That's a big part of this discussion today. But Sue, I want you to think through on some of the other clients that we've got set up. So how many clients do you guys have that are using this in production? Six clients. Okay.
And one is a kind of a make to orderist, make to stockist, sophisticated equipment in the biotech area. So they make blood analyzer machines. So multiple bills, serialized items, complex manufacturing. Another one is diesel engine parts.
Okay.
Another one, they more of a distributor, but they make those cell phone sized credit card readers. Now the cell phone is like 2 inches thick, if you will, and the card slides in there. Mm-hmm. And there's firmware in the electronics that is predisposed or configured per bank. And all the items are serialized, of course. And they might buy 500 for Bank of America, sell 400. Now they got 100 left. No more orders for Bank of America. So they deconstruct them and reconfigure the firmware for Wells Fargo and then reapply the serial numbers. So that's a company that uses the product. And then we've got a company that does packaging because they're like a jewelry company. So they're distributors. So the package for Walmart's different than Kohl's. So that's another one. And UCP.
OVA.
Pardon?
OVA in the process.
Yeah. And then, yeah, we
skim
just
on
got a
the
new one.
process industry.
Yeah, we're going to run MRP for them and planning an MRP. And then we've not had a lot of job shop because we didn't have that placeholder item. And so we ran into issues with our presentations with companies that did not want to utilize or quote items directly out of the item master because, frankly, you might win 1 out of 2, 1 out of 3 deals, right? And they didn't want to populate Acumatica with superfluous items that they were never going to buy nor sell. So the last few months, we put a lot of money into developing the placeholder item and also supporting partials. So now we can generate a work order and we can bill partially out of the work order. Think an engineer to order environment where you're building a pilot system and you got a lot of R&D at time and material. So you got an open work order, but you're billing the labor against that open work order. Or a make to order, make to stock where you got high volume. So you got a work order to, deliver 120 widgets and you deliver 10 a month. So option 1 is 10 widgets a month or 12 work orders at 10 each. Option 2 is 1 work order where you partially deliver. And when you support serialization against partials, that's some pretty complex behind the scenes coding that we had to do to accommodate that. So we're excited about the job shop engineer to order market because with placeholders, we now believe we've got the functionality to meet that need. We've done okay in make to stock and make to order and light assembly, right? Where you mix and match, guys like a distributor. We did a distributor where they were selling candles and the base of the candle was always the same, but the height of the candle was different. And they didn't want to pre-stock, right? Back to that original Acumatica non-stock versus stocking item. Some would call it hole in the software because a lot of ERP packages have a kind of a bill of material for distribution and Acumatica doesn't.
Yep, that's kind of why we're having this conversation as well.
Yeah.
So that sounds good. I appreciate that. Just curious. I think we should just jump into the software, and I think that will help.
Great.
Tim and Sue and kind of grasp.
So, Greg, can you? I don't know if I have to stop sharing. Yeah, I'm going to stop sharing, Greg. And
Thanks for that information.
By the way, we have Frank. We have Frank Go on the line too, and Frank's kind of our deployment guy. Okay. So we're getting some software ready for you to have in house, and Frank's the guy that handles all that. So
that's awesome.
Okay, I'm Greg Barry. I don't know how many years ago was it, but we started off. How many years ago did we start doing this? 8 years ago or something as a customization for a customer, and it's evolved into what it is today. So you're kind of seeing the culmination of all that. Just a caveat today, I just upgraded to a new machine in Windows 7, so I've got a limited data set on this one. I haven't got actually my main demo thing running, so I pre-apologize if some things here aren't fleshed out very well. The main gist of our software focuses around the work order. And so if we look at our work orders, we can see this is basically a tracking board, just a little bit of color on it to identify us, the different phases of work orders that we have. And you'll notice that we have them planning, planned, some are completed, and released. And we also have partially completed work orders here. So we have these varying stages. Now, what we do is, as Jim said, we actually use the kit. So just for doing a lot of our financial and inventory transactions. So I'll just show you that. What we're doing here, you're looking at one of our work orders, and here you're seeing materials. So these are all the materials that we have. And then we have our labor and non-stock items here. And these can be outside services and labor, or we even, in some cases, for some customers, have where we're trying to schedule something like, say, a laser cutter or something like that. We've even actually added a laser cutter as a non-stock item. That way we're not packing inventory with it. We have partial completions. If you want, as Jim said, you can partially complete a number of items before we go. And then we have job costing. And in our job costing, for the quotation side, you actually can use one of our work orders as a quotation worksheet. Starting from a sales order, you can actually create a quote. It'll create one of our work orders as a quotation worksheet. You can do all your work there, push those costs back to the sales order, and when you want, if you're successful, you can then take that worksheet and turn that into a work order simply by changing the quote into a work order. So we'll do that. When we go through the process, we'll actually keep track of the actuals, and we'll actually show you a variance at the end of your job. So when Jim said we have a dynamic BOM, what we mean by that is we can, at any time we want, and this is a released work order, and there's a kit out here with everything that's on it. And you can see there's the kit, there's the non-stock items. And so we're not going to use this in our environment. We're not going to use this for really anything except assigning serial numbers, because there's a lot of code behind assigning serial numbers. But we basically are going to hijack the kit to work for us. So in this case, if I go in and I add an item here that I want, and I'll just pick an item here. And add it to the kit. This is actually in this case, it's actually a manufactured subassembly. So I'm actually adding a manufactured item in here, and I can add the quantity I want here, and then I'll save it. But I don't want to get too complex at this point. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to delete that, and I actually don't want to add a kit here because that's going to get a little bit more complex than I want to show initially. So we'll go out and we'll just take a simple plate here and add it. And I want to go through and I want to add 5 of those. And I'll save that. And I'll go out and I'll check my kit. And you'll notice that it added those 5 items to my kit. So it's basically taken over the kit, and it's syncing everything that's happening on the work order back to the kit, so that we're doing that. And we're actually keeping track of all the allocations and everything as well, because we have an MRP engine in the system. So if I look at my allocations, I can look at my allocations, and you'll see that we're actually injecting allocations into the allocations table in Acumatica. And here we are right here. This is from our Flex production work order. We're actually saying that we have a demand for the items right here. We're actually seeing a demand for 5 items, and it's line number 4 in this particular thing. We're smart enough to know that sometimes items like a serialized item can actually be allocated on a kit. And we're smart enough to know that that allocation is actually the work order says it wants 4, and the kit says it wants 4. And our system is smart enough to know that, oh no, really you mean you really only want 4, not 8. And so it basically is keeping track in the background of all of these things to make sure that we're not doubly allocated in these items. But that's generally how we get our demand in the system, the same as every other Acumatica, POs, sales orders, Acumatica manufacturing. Everybody uses this method, and so we're using this method as well. You likewise, if you want, you can add labor to a work order if you choose. So if I go out, I can pick a labor item, or I can pick a non-stock item if I like. If I run out and I pick a non-stock item, and if it's one that I purchase from another vendor, I can actually go out and it will create I can actually create a PO for that item directly from here. So in an example where I'm a manufacturer and at some point in time, I have an outside service come in, say for instance, it's sandblasting. Well, that can be on my item specification / bill of materials, and it will come in, and the system will know at some point in time when I'm going through the manufacturing process, I'm right here. And when it wants, I can actually, if there is a vendor assigned to the item and it's purchased, this will be enabled, and I'll be able to create a PO from here. Likewise, on materials, I'll also have the ability to create POs for this item and all subsequent items. And what I mean by subsequent items, these are lower level sub-assemblies that I may be manufacturing as well. So I'm going to go through the motions here. I'm just going to go through and check it. And you'll see here that our MRP system has gone out and told us that, well, we have some in inventory and we're going to have to purchase some. So it's going to go out and it's looked at the inventory. It's looked at all of the allocations for that inventory, and it's found out that, oh, we have some that we can consume for this particular order, but we're going to have to purchase some. Now, at this point, if I want, I can actually go through and, in this case, I'm not logged in as a user with purchasing privileges, but I can actually purchase the work order recommendations at this point, and it will generate POs. Now, the next question that usually comes up is, well, I don't really buy like that. I buy for all the orders that I have at one time. Well, we do have a function specifically dedicated where you can select a number of work orders. You can define these work orders by a time fence or by a top level work order and all of the sub level work orders. And then you can buy all the goods that you need. So what I mean by that is, if I go out and I look at a component that's complex, and I can pick, oh, by the way, you can build any previous revision if you want. So if you're in the business of replacing equipment that you have out in the field and the customer wants exactly like they had it, what you can do is you can use revision numbers kind of as built, so that all you need to do is ask them the version they want. And we can actually build old versions of a particular item. That's just a comment. But here's, getting back to what I was trying to say, here's an example of a complex work order. And you can see that we're actually 4 levels deep here. So what will happen is when I want to build this item, it will run through for every manufactured item. It's going to look and see if I have enough of that item in stock. If I don't have enough of that item in stock, it will generate a work order for me to make that. And so it will go all the way down through. But when I'm purchasing it, if I go through, it kind of looks at the information like this. When I'm purchasing for a work order and all its dependent sub-assemblies, it sort of flattens the bill of material like this. So it runs out and it says, okay, you want me to look at this work order, and everything that's on a work order that's a sub-assembly, even sub-assemblies within sub-assemblies, it flattens that right out, and it gives you a list of what you want, aggregates it all, and then it'll cut POs to your vendors. And so rather than have 4 line items for the same thing to a vendor, it'll aggregate all that, and the vendor across all the work orders that you select will only get a PO, and they'll only get one line item for each item that they're going to be asked to buy. Going back to our production orders, if we look at a production order, here's a production order, and this is one where we had a partial completion. So what we did is we actually went out and we actually have completed 2 already on this particular order. So, and the system is smart enough to be able to keep track of that. You'll notice that we had originally planned 4, and then inevitably the production manager's worst nightmare, the sales manager comes down and says, how fast can I have 2? So you go through and you make 2, but then that gets your paperwork all funky. Well, in this case, what you can do is you can actually just quickly complete the 2, and this will push the 2 through. And so they've actually gone through. There's a separate kit created for that. It's pushed 2 through the system and deducted these components and the material from the material from your inventory, and it's actually put 2 back in inventory, and you have your serial numbers or your lot number on this particular item here, and you can now actually sell that. So if you've got an open work order and you have to get something through that work order in order to be able to get it on a sales order and sell it, we actually have that capability. So I can go through and I can add more if I want, except I can't complete, or I can't do a sub-assembly for more than is left on the work order. So there's actually some rules around this, but we actually make sure that you keep things in line. And the original work order, I'm just going to go back here. And we're doing things like on the original work order, this was for 4, we finished 2. If I go back and look at the original kit is now for 2. So it's smart enough to be able to keep track of the fact that I originally wanted to have 4 on the work order, but I partially completed 2. So that really means I really only need to finish 2. So it's going through and doing things like that. If I go back into, I'll show you some other features specifically for Job Shop. And I'll show you from I know we've got a limited amount of time here. I'll start here and I'll show you from the limit of a sales order. We've really got 3 main ways you can get work orders into the system. You can manually put them in. You can have our production planning system and master production schedule put them in for you if you're more of a forecaster, build to forecast type of manufacturer. If you're a make to order customer, you can have the sales order drive the generation of work orders. And that's what I'll do at this point. I'll go in and I'll create a sales order. Haven't fired this bit up yet today. It's slow. So I'll sell something to the University of Florida. And what I'll do is I'll sell them an item and I'll put a inventory item here, how many I want. I want 2. Now, here's where our system varies. You'll notice here that the system has noted that this is a manufactured item. I can have a dedicated work order made for this. In this case, I have 2 available. I could choose to sell the 2 to the customer. They're on the shelf ready to go. But if the customer wants something unique, say they want some slight modification to it and I have to do something slightly different, then what I can do is I can say generate a work order for that. So what I'll do is I'll save that. In order to be able to generate a work order, what am I not doing here? Details. Reason code. Oh, sorry. Wrong order type. My fault. I'm just going to start again and do a sales order. I don't want to do that type of order. So I want to do a sales order. That's what I want. This is actually customer data and they set it up that way. And so I'll just go Florida. My University of Florida again. I'll go through and I'll add my item again. Again, it's a manufactured item. I'm going to say I want a dedicated work order. Now I'll save it. I'm not sure what's gone on there. Let me go and see if I can find one in the system here. I'm doing some testing at this point in time. Show you how that works. Well, God, I don't have one here. I'm not sure what's going on there. Anyway, sorry about that. It's supposed to generate a sales order, and that sales order will have a work order, and then I can go out to the work order and I can make all the changes on the work order that I want. I'm just going to try it with a different item. Maybe it's potentially that item that's the cause of the problem. One last time. And what do I want? I want, oops, do I have a custom job in here? So if it's just totally a custom job, no, I want to go back to the sales order. Sorry, I'm on the wrong document. My fault, guys. So I want to go to an SO order type. Sales order. Customer. Texas A&M. Oh, why don't they like Texas? Okay, pick anybody. Save that. Add an item. I'm going to do just a job shop item. Custom job. Okay, I want quantity of 1. Custom job. Try saving it now. Okay, I've done that. Now what I want to do is I want to, if I've done that, I want to create a dedicated work order for that. So what I'll do is I'll generate a production order. It generates a production order. And this is a unique one where this is really very much a blank work order that I have here. And what I do have is I do have some labor items on this item spec. I put it in here. And now I can go in and I can start creating that. You'll notice that it knows that this demand actually came from the sales order. So in order to ship this line on the sales order, the line for this item on the sales order, this work order must be complete and these goods must be in inventory in order for me to ship against that sales order lines. Because what I'm doing is I'm essentially saying I potentially could be building a bespoke item for this customer. And it's important that the finished goods from this work order end up fulfilling the demand on the sales order line for the work order. So now I can go through and I can add all of the items that I need here on this particular work order. And let's say one of these, I'm going to show an engineer to order feature, is a placeholder item. So what I'm doing here is this is a placeholder item. Now what I'm doing is I'm actually saving this. This is a placeholder item, and you'll notice it's highlighted as yellow. And that may be for quotation purposes. The customer may want to quote at this point in time. And so what I may do is I may develop a quote. I can go to this and I can push these. I can develop my quote, put in a cost markup I want, and then I can push this price back to the sales order and tell the customer what I think the quote is going to be and the delivery time is going to be, if I want. But what I can't do is I won't be able to actually advance this beyond the planned stage until I replace that place order item with a stock inventory item. That's how we do engineer to order. People are, say, for instance, we had one customer that we got very close to in the sales cycle with, who built overhead bridge cranes. And one of the things that they might do is they might have, at some point in time, they might just decide that they're going to do a quote for somebody, and then they would run through, and it would be like their electric motor starters or their controllers. There was like some electronic equipment that they didn't have specifically in their stock items, but they wanted to be able to add those items and work them up on a quote. And so they used a placeholder item. And you'll know, so then I can actually add other items to this as well, if I want. And go through the motions of how many I want. And I can do like 75, do something ridiculous. I can save this. And then I can actually look, it'll show me my inventory as I go along here and do all of the things that I want to do. So that's the way I can actually build a quote. And if I go through here, that's actually the sales order is what's driving that from this perspective. Now, on the same token, I can do that. I can actually go through and create a quote if I want to. Now, I know there's varying ways of doing quotes in the system, but within this system, I can actually go out and I can actually do a quote, as I said, and you can go through and do, pick one here. Let's pick somebody. And I can go through and I can add an inventory item here. Let's see if one of these ones will work here. Let's pick something that might have been a fault I had with that. What do I want here? Oh, these are now I'm into non-stock items here. It's a kit here. I think if I select that and I go through and I want to, and I save that and I go through, now I can, it's not a kit. So I'm not allowed to pick it. It has to be, it is flagged as a kit, but it must not have an item spec, because at this point in time, I cannot select it. So there probably is no item specification for it. So, but I could create a kit, go through the motions of a quote. It would create a worksheet. At this point in time, we don't call it a work order. We call it a worksheet because it's actually in the system as a quote. So if we go back to production orders here, I'm all over the place, guys, because I know we've got a limited amount of time here today. So I'm just jumping around trying to show you the highlights. So we were here. One of the other things I wanted to show you was that you can actually import a template if you want. We have something called templates. So for certain job shop manufacturers, they may have things that they want. So I can actually go out and I can actually import a template if I want. I have one item selected as a template here. And so I'll select that. And so what that did was that actually brought in the items from that template item. So where might that be useful? That might be useful if you're saved. We had a prospect that was building wire shelving. And at the end of the day, they weren't big enough for us, but they liked our solution. But what they did is they would go out and they would have a bunch of base components and a bunch of base labor operations that they would want to do on a work order. And then they would go from there. Well, we have the template thing. It'll bring in all of that, those labor items and all of the materials that you would generally use on that. So rather than have to go hunt and peck through the system and find all of these items each and every time that they do a work order, they can just add a template or 2 or 3 or 4, however many templates they want. So they can kind of in a certain way, use it, add recipes to their system to build it. One last thing I want to show in the time we have here is going through, and I want to show our production planning system, which is another way that you can actually get information into the system. So we have the ability to look at history, and from that history derive, apply some analytical methods and derive a forward strip of what your demand for a particular item might be. So if I show you a production plan that we have out there, if I go out there, you'll notice here's a production plan that we have. And so what we did is we actually went out and let me do a new one here for you. Probably better to show you that. And we'll come back to this. So I'll do a new production plan and I'll add an item to it, and I'll add my 5, 1, 2, 4. Let's say we'll add that kit. And we'll pick a revision of that kit that we want to look at. And now the forecast method that we want to use, you can go manually, which is you can basically say, pull all the data out for me and in this case, I'll go through, say, let's use linear regression. Okay. And I'll say, what are my bucket sizes that I want? I've got weekly, monthly, quarterly. In this case, I'll go monthly. What's the planning horizon that I want to work on? So I'll work on May 1st to April 30th of the following year. So we'll go out here. So we'll go out here, and we'll go like this, and I can add seasonality. We won't get fancy, a work calendar or that sort of stuff. And now I can say, what's the source of my data? So the source of my data, I can actually have manufacturing. So if it's a subassembly that I use across a number of different products that I make, I won't have any sales history for it. So a better analysis of or better data in order to be able to do my forward strip of what I need off of it is going to be my manufacturing data. But sometimes it's a product that I sell, and it's a product that I sell, and maybe a product that I sell and I bring in manufacturing from other branches that do some stuff for me. I'm the main branch, and I might want to get a forecast. So I can use either manufacturing or sales data as my source. So I'm going to use this. If I what's it looking for? Oh, hang on. What's it saying it didn't like about that? Well, what do you mean? That date is bigger. Anyway. I'm not going to play with this too much longer here. Okay, now I can calculate a forecast. It'll run out. I don't know, something's wrong with this particular one, so let's not belabor the point. It will generate a forecast for me. And here you'll see where it's gone out, and it's actually generated this forecast out for periods. Now you say, what are the differences in colors here? Well, what I can do is I can basically say, what are the periods that I want to generate for? So if I say 4 periods, it's run out and it's done this calculation for me. Green means I've already generated it. So I'm using this now as a master production schedule. The 2 green boxes here mean, okay, you've already generated work orders for that. But I'm saying that I want to generate up to the 4th period. So it's saying that if I click this generate work orders, it's actually going to generate work orders for this amount for me. If I want, if I want at this point in time, I can actually run out and I can actually flip to manual. And now I can manually change these amounts if I want before I generate my work orders. And so this way I'm using my forecast. It does my forward strip, and I can actually generate or release work orders against my master production schedule. And this is showing me what I have done, what I am about to do. And when you look at those, you can see ones from the previous system that we were in. You can see here's a case of where we have some orders in the system that were like this. Finally, just a couple of quick items on the work order here. If we look at it, we have the ability to what we call quick complete, which is really just standard back flushing. We record on a system the actual amount that you consume. So for instance, we're saying that the quantity required is 1. So we expect, this is a serialized, probably a serialized item. So it already forces me to consume 1. But if it's a non-serialized item, I can put a different amount in. Now, I can actually put a scrap item in. If I scrap an item, it will actually generate a inventory adjustment for that scrapped item, so that I can, when it's on that inventory adjustment, I can put on there my reason and it can say, okay, somebody dropped a delicate instrument on the shop floor and it was damaged or it was defective or whatever I want. But I can generally account for scrap. And I can change my quantity consumed can be different. Say, for instance, one of the items I say I want to consume is something like what would be hydraulic oil. And let's say sometimes you'll spill some, have to go back to the barrel, get more, and add it again. That's really not scrap. That's sort of like an overage. That's kind of an expected thing. You can just change the quantity consumed to a higher number. And all that will be pushed out to the kit, and it'll be accounted for in the job costing module. We actually have the ability here as well to allocate inventory. If you've got an order that's very, very rush, and it absolutely has to go out, it's a drop dead kind of situation. What I used to do when I was in the production manager's job is I used to run out, go to the stores thing, grab that second last hydraulic pump that I needed for a unit that I was going to build, take it and put it underneath my desk so nobody else issued it or sold it out from underneath me. Well, we can kind of do that virtually here. You can actually do this, and we'll actually generate an inventory transfer to virtually and or physically move that item to a new location, and we'll have the transfer receipt number. If we have sub-assemblies, it'll keep track of the sub-assemblies that stuff's built on. We can go through and look at that. If we look at, so say for instance, here we have a parent work order number. So if I look at this particular work order here, you'll notice that it says that I have a parent work order number. So it knows that hierarchical relationship. And if I go to the one before it, you'll notice that it actually goes out and it goes, oh, here's that subassembly. So the system is actually keeping track of that hierarchy, keeping track of the status. And if I went to try and complete this work order and this subassembly was not complete, it would generally throw up messages to me and go, whoa, how are you managing to do this? A dependent subassembly is not yet completed. And with vendors, if for instance, I say, oh no, I found one and I want to just delete the subassembly, I can delete it here if I want. Keeps track of your purchases, your purchasing information if you want. If the system came up here with a fulfillment plan of purchasing the item, you could then generate purchase orders, and your purchase orders would be listed over here. So some of the things that we can do is you can purchase for work order chain requirements. That's to purchase for this work order and all of these subsequent work orders. It'll do a work order for that. We actually do print a work order. So we can actually go through, and there is a traveler that goes out in the shop and it does have barcodes on it. So you can get I'll look at what that looks like. And of course, these are all customizable for the individual companies, but you've got your labor and you've got your materials. One last final item before we throw it open for questions. We had talked about capturing time. We have a time, a work order time module. You basically go in, you put in your work order, and then everybody is given a access code, and the access code is only known to them. So they put their access code. There's one workstation, maybe on the shop floor, maybe in the lunchroom, I don't know where, but they maybe scribble on their hard copy that was printed out and given to them as a work order, how much time they spent, they put it in there. And now you go in and you can pick the operation that you're working on, or you can even scan it off the work order and it'll pull up the operation that you're working on. And then you can add how much time you're working on. You've got the ability to clock on, clock off, manually enter it. I doubt anybody ever does that, or just put in your duration. So if I just put, okay, I worked 25 minutes on it this day, I can put that on and save it. And this pushes back and increments the quantity consumed for this labor item on the work order. So it will keep track of that. And if it's like for this particular item here, it remembers what I did the day before, and it'll accumulate that, and it's going to accumulate all the total labor time that I'm here. And this is not only my time, but my coworkers' time that may be on this, so that we can see that we had originally scheduled 20 minutes, and to date, we have actually not booked any time on this particular item. So that's how we don't use a named user for each and every person that might be entering time. They basically have this one form where they put in their code that identifies them as an employee. So we have
Can I interrupt for a sec? Do you have the ability to record time across multiple work orders at the same time? So if I'm running a laser cutter and I'm running 5 jobs off one sheet, can I post time to all 5 at the same time?
No, you have to go in and you'll have to select each work order.
Okay.
Any other questions? I'm sure we missed something, but
So
those were the highlights.
Greg?
Yes?
Just show the ATP just for a second, and also the cost roll-up.
So if we go to a sales order, let's just go to manufacturing, go to a production order. Let's just find one with a sales order on it. So do I have another one with a sales order on it? Okay, we'll go to that one. So if we go to one here and we go to a, let's go to the sales order. So I want to go to that particular sales order. So if we are, I think it was this one. Right. Here we are here. If we haven't generated the work order, we have in real time, you can actually go out and you can hit our ATP button and it will go out and it will look at in real time. If you're asked to give a, what's your availability on this item on the phone, it'll run out and because I've generated the work order now, it won't do it, but it'll run out and it'll go and it'll take all of the items, look at all the inventory that I have, even right to potentially to the bottom of all the sub-assemblies I have. If it determines I need sub-assemblies, does all this in memory, and then it will come back and tell me, it'll come back and tell me when I can promise that based on the material that I have available in the company. So that's the ATP function. It's right there on the sales order line.
And that would be kind of cool, like if you're a distributor and you've got kit, model 101, 102, 103, and they all have component A in them. And, you got 30 A's in stock and you sell 15 in 101, and then 20 minutes later, 15 in model 102, you're out. And then someone says, hey, I want model 103, hit the ATP button and it'll blow through and oops, we're out of components, we can't deliver. Which is pretty cool when you think about it.
Yeah. So you can, as I said, you can basically pick a warehouse that you're working off here. And this will run out and I can say what work orders I want to look at. And now in this one, I can do a requirement reports for all these work orders that I've selected. Or if I want to process, it'll basically process all these work orders. What am I short? And it'll create a purchase order for me. So that's really using our material planning system across a number of different work orders. There's a process screen. We used to do a lot of work with early on with a lot of people who were into e-tailing. And so we had a lot of people that were basically pushing a large number of orders into the system. And when work orders needed to be generated for them, so we can set it up with automation and scheduling to do all of the various actions that we have. You can actually do these. So you can actually run through and you could actually automate to run all these particular items. We had one prospect that made what did they make, those guys? They made like doggy beds and stuff like that.
Yeah, big old pillows, but they were for dogs.
Yeah, and of course then they were pushing through hundreds and hundreds of these orders a day, so they needed to be able to automate flowing work orders through the system. And they needed to actually, an extension to that, they actually needed to be able to aggregate all of the similar orders so that they would build them all at one time during the day. So, so anyway, any questions that I can answer?
Sue, based on what you're seeing here and what you know, job ops, what?
Yeah. What about the pricing side of it? So in the case where you have kind of this build to order concept, you know, I've got a rail card I need to refurbish and I have no idea. I don't know if it needs wheels or what it's all going to need. And I don't really know how much labor it's going to take. And so if I've got a sales order and I'm selling a generic refurbished rail car and I have a host of various parts, never the same, and I have labor that it's going to take to install or manufacture those parts. And my billing rule is to essentially say, my agreement with the customer is that, you know, whatever the cost of the material is at that time, I am going to price this work out to you at a cost times markup. So I'm going to buy or manufacture a wheel. I'm going to buy or manufacture steel, or, you know, buy some steel, or, you know, whatever I'm going to do. How does the costs on the associated production schedule associated to that order drive the pricing?
Well, I had this particular item here, and I had, this was very much a blank work order, or almost a blank work order. I had 2 labor items on it. We went into it. We added a bunch of items. What I'll do is I'll just delete this particular item here because we're not actually carrying a price for it. So let's just delete that item and save it. And so it's cost plus. So I might have, you know, some steel, some stuff that I'm doing on here. And what I'm doing is I've got a price here. I can now say, okay, so my price is 65 cents. Or $65, okay, and what I want to do is I want to mark it up, so I want to go say 200%. So I go like that. There's my price there, and then I can push that back to the sales order. And so if I go back to the sales order, okay, and I refresh it, I should see that price pushed back. There's that price that we had has been pushed back to the sales order. So I went to the work order. I basically put my materials in it. Then I applied the markup factor that I had probably negotiated with my customer, and I pushed that back to the sales order. And that might change, you know, as I go through and the work order changes. If I go through and I change that from 75, say it turns out I didn't need 75, I needed 125. And I save that. And then I go to my job cost pricing and I go through and my markup is, you know, 350%. And now I push that back and I push that back to the sales order. So you can keep going in that cycle as you want. At some point in time, when you're finished the work order, you can no longer push the sales price back, but that's how you might be able to do that function. We also have one other function that might be useful for you is we have a repair function. If you go out to the inventory items that we have out here, you can actually name a particular item as a repair item. So if I pull up an item, and this is a item that I might do, I can actually create a repair item. So for instance, if I had this finished good, and what I'm going to do is I quite often bring it back into my shop and I repair it. And so I don't know what I'm going to have to do to repair it. So what I would do is I would have repair cell sorter. Might be just the name of a item that I have, and I flag this as a repair item. And then it will say, okay, what item are you generally going to repair with that? And I'm generally going to repair this cell sorter. And then what I may have on the item spec for this repair item, I may have, say, a service kit, all the seals and gaskets and everything that I use, bearings that I use to refurbish this particular item. Then when I create the work order, on the work order, it's going to create a line item for the item that I'm repairing, because I'm expecting it to come back into inventory, and it could be serialized. So I'm bringing it in with a serial number that I've already shipped out. So I'm going to bring it back in. It's going to be in here. I'm basically going to rework it. So I'm going to keep track of all of the items on that work order that I'm going to do. And then at the end of the day, I'm going to end up shipping that item back to the customer, and I'm going to end up billing him for all the work that I did to it. But it's a way for me to get that item in and out through the system, so I can actually mark an item as a repair item. And when I do that, I can run out and I can say, okay, what's the item that I'm actually going to repair? And it's the way, if we go to the work order. Sorry to interrupt you there, but I thought that might be something that's useful to you there as well. We actually can define an item as a repair item. You'll see out here, there's a field out here for repair. And so it will keep track of that repaired item. So actually, if you have somebody that's interested in that, it's a good idea to set up a dedicated demo and walk that through the system for them, so that they get an idea whether it'll accommodate how they do things or not. Kind of a hard concept to talk to when we don't really have all the data in the system to show it.
Right. If we have, let's just say that, if a rail car is going to be repaired over a 3-month period of time, big equipment, there's lead time, there's all this sort of stuff that they have to sort of pull it apart to see what's damaged, to figure out what needs to be fixed. So in this case, because the repair is going to span a length of time, they're going to want to bill out the costs that have been accumulated in the month of January. They get to the end of January, the material costs are going to have a cost times markup. What materials have I put into this job? The customer has agreed to accept progress billings that we're going to keep track of. We put in items 1 through 10 this month, and we've got 100 hours of labor. The costs potentially are going to be billed at a markup from the cost of the material, and the labor is going to probably have a standard billing rate associated to it. Can it keep track of which items have been costed to that order and do the essential partial billing of what's costed so far, where the materials are going to be costed with a cost times markup, and the labor is going to be its own billable line, I guess. It's going to essentially accumulate how many hours of labor, that whether or not I've got an apprentice, maybe I have an apprentice and a senior manager and, whatever, they all have different labor rates. It's not really going to be based off of the actual paid rate of the employee, but a standard rate for the type of labor that is being used. And then, we want to build those 10 items and those 100 hours, whatever we've put in so far, bill that. And then in the month of February, we're going to buy some more stuff because we've learned what we've learned and added the labor, and have the next batch of things essentially progress billed, or, as we go through that project. Can it keep track of that?
No.
A concept?
In a word, no. And there's an elegant way to do that job, and we don't do it elegantly. Now, it would have to be some sort of a customization, because in order for us to do that within what we have in Acumatica, we would really need to go back to the sales order and probably do. So what we would need to do is, the hard part is having the inventory transaction. So in Acumatica, what would be the triggering document that would tell you that we actually consumed some inventory? Well, it would either be the work order would have to track that, or we would have to, in some way, identify to the Acumatica system that we've moved inventory, done something with inventory, so that we get a transaction, and then we're carrying a cost, because in Acumatica, maybe we're using FIFO costing or whatever. So we have to have the transaction to get the cost if we want to bill the customer on actual costs that we have. And it gets kind of messy as to how you might track that within Acumatica. I mean, a system built from the ground up for that can do it, but Acumatica sort of needs these transactions to happen. So how would we get through? Well, the labor for us, if you were recording labor, okay, we're partway there, because we create, although we say that we've consumed X amount of labor, if we enter them through our time entry system, we know who, okay, so that's going to give us a cost. We know when, because they're actually telling us a start and a stop time, so we can put date fences around that. So for the labor, we can probably do a pretty good job of saying, okay, yeah, I can tell you what the labor was for a given month. And then what we would do in that case would be, we've actually spitballed this before, because it's not the first time we've come across progress billing. What we would do is we would actually then at that point in time create a line item on the sales order. And the line item on the sales order would be progress billing for April. And so for labor, that would be pretty easy for us, either to write that into the product or to do it as a customization. It gets a little messier for materials. And now that we have this new capability of allocating materials, so what I can do is I can allocate the material, but the problem here is I can't allocate less than I want. So if I have a line item for steel and I want to say, okay, I consumed, I figured overall I was going to need 200 feet of, 6x6 by ½ flat bar to repair this rail car. And to date, I've used 50 and I want to bill the customer. What I would have to do is I would have to go through, and we can actually do this. I can actually add another line. What's that number of that? I can actually add the same line again. 100011. I can actually add the same line again. And what I'd have to do is I'd have to reduce this quantity, right, to 63. And then I'd have to make this one, 65 or whatever, 65. And then what I could do is I would go out and I would say, okay. And I said, it's not elegant, but I would go through and I'd say, okay, I'm going to move that. And I'm going to move that to a, let's say I'm going to move that to I've got an item out here and I might call it, I don't have it in this system, but sometimes we could have an inventory item called production, or an inventory location called consumed by production, okay? And I would do that. Now, when I generate my transfer, I have a date on the transfer. And what I said was important was, in order to be able to know what I've consumed, I have to have an Acumatica transaction. Now I've got an Acumatica transaction. I've got this. And so at any given point, it could look like this. We could do a customization, or maybe potentially, we've had enough demand for it, we write it into the product. We basically do is it would prepare progress billing line item. And of course, one of the demands of that would be, a constraint would be that this would have to be owned by a sales order. And so what we would do is we would then go through and we would add a line item, push back to the sales order, add a line item for progress billing. And so then you would ship that, which would be, the name of the line item would be progress work for the month of April 2023. And you would then go back, if you wanted to bill them, you'd go back to the work order, basically ship it or create a invoice for that line item and bill the customer. And in that way, we would do it. But I don't like it, and it's not as elegant as it could be, because it gets messy, because you're going to end up with a lot of stuff here. Now, you can make it easy by say, okay, stuff I've already consumed, don't show it to me. We could make a button where you turn it off and do stuff like that. But Again, this is just an extension of what we spitballed, but elegantly, can we do that as elegantly as I would like to do it, or as dedicated programs do? I don't know. I guess that's your call, but
Yeah.
I think we could do it at the end of the day.
And in this case, I mean, you know, they don't necessarily, well, I don't know. I guess I don't know the nuance of that. Sometimes they don't know what they need, so they just essentially think that, you know, I need so much of these individual components, and they pull that off the shelf, and that's what they put into production. So maybe at the time that they're doing this, they may only pull 62 of that first line item, not knowing how much they need, because they don't know until they're into it, kind of thing. So they don't have a predetermined list of materials. Okay.
Right. So you know, what we could do is you could make it a little more elegant. You could go like here, and you could have another button up here that would say, you know, production consume. Okay. We'd probably have a better name for it than that. And you do that, and what it would do is it would create another line item, and you would enter the quantity, and then we would do that. Again, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get an Acumatica transaction within that time fence that we want to bill for. Because when I do the transaction, then I have the cost. And if I'm using the cost as a markup, then I have that. So not so bad when you're using standard cost, but if you start using FIFO, you know, where people are using components that come in at different prices from different suppliers and want to track that, then you must have that transaction in order to get the cost.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. How much time did we have, Jim, for our discussion today? Oh, Jim's gone AWOL. Any other questions?
I'm here. I got a phone call. So
I knew you did. You're multitasking.
We got a lot to digest here, but so Tim, any final questions? Sue, any final questions?
I think for now, I'm good. Appreciate the time and the details of going into it for us.
Now, did you guys want us to go ahead and provide you with a copy of the software?
Yeah, I think we still want to move forward on that, but you know, let's regroup, but let's keep that in motion. I mean, I think part of this too is, again, we've got some really sharp, smart people on staff, and they're all busy, but we've got to kind of get this in our hands as well. I mean, as you can see, we kind of do some things out of the box. So yeah, I want to move forward with that still. Yeah.
Thank you. We appreciate that opportunity.
So let's, I guess from a turnaround on that, you know, probably be some follow-up questions. I recorded this so I can send this off to Brad as well, but we'll regroup. But you and I, let's regroup on how we get this again loaded on our environment, who I need to have involved on my side, your side, and let's keep moving forward on that.
That'd be great. And if you don't mind, we would like a copy of this recording too.
Yeah.
So it kind of shows the latest and greatest, and I'd appreciate it.
Sure.
Okay, so Tony, I'll reach out to you first thing tomorrow morning. Frank will get it, and you could help us out a little bit. We've been working on data sets to complement our product. So we have a data set for a job shop environment and a data set for make to stock, and we'll go over that with you guys too. That way we got some data in there you can play with. That's good. So
okay, sounds good.
Yep, that sounds
all right.
good.
Thanks,
Appreciate
guys.
it, Jim. Thank you.
I appreciate it
so
very
much.
much.
Appreciate it.
No, thank you.
Look forward to working with you. Yeah. Bye bye. Great job, Greg. Bye bye.
All right. Bye.